Importantly, when you brush your teeth in the morning and you look in the mirror, can you actually look at yourself and say, I'm pleased to meet you today? They said, because you're going to spend the whole day with yourself. And if you're not pleased with what you see and how you feel, then only you can do something about it.
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. I'm your host, Julie Cluff. And as always, I'm going to invite you to like and subscribe and comment, do all the things. It helps us get the word out and helps us to spread the word about these good spiritual topics. So today I have on the show a special guest, Jill Cole. Hi, Jill.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited that you're here today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. What a privilege.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the background of the whole story.
Born in Africa, married a New Zealander, came to New Zealand in 1987 and had some experiences in Africa, but everything really started opening up in New Zealand. I'm an author, I'm a channel, I'm a clairvoyant. I started doing mediumship for the first time in Egypt when I took a group there last year, so that was a bit of a shock to my system. I get incredible messages. Also, I started becoming a medical intuitive and seeing inside the human body. And I have just been given the Feather Path, which is an incredible body of work today. I'd love to share some of that with you. And the latest is they've asked me to take groups of people to Egypt. So that's what I've been doing. I've got a new group that if anybody would like to come this September, and I'm doing it with somebody called Blair Styra, who's a channel, who's been doing channeling for about 30 years. He channels an entity called Tabash. And we've been told that the group that's coming this time are going to receive an activation that's going to completely change their lives. So basically, I just hear things, see things, feel things, receive information, whether it's through watching, it feels like a video playing, and then I put it into action. You know, it's like receiving instructions.
That's awesome. I'm hearing all this and I can appreciate it, as a spiritual medium myself and channel and so forth. And I'm listening to all of this and the way that all this openness that you have. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. I always do, but I'm like, how do you stay grounded?
Because I realize that I'm here to expand, not contract. And the older I've got, the more comfortable I've got with myself. And I think so many people, they said to me, one of the questions I've got to ask is, who are you living for? And so many people are living for other people, other people's opinions. And I've got a perfect example. So should we just get right into it?
Sure, let's get right into it.
Okay. So in September, I had an operation and I was told that I had to be in bed for 6 weeks, complete bed rest. And the best gift I could ever get. I mean, how fabulous to be told that you've got to stay in bed for 6 weeks. And the information that I started receiving. And then I realized afterwards it all happened. And everything, the operation was all about my root chakra. So we're talking about grounding, the base, right? Getting the base really solid and strong for the work that I've got to do. And while I finished the 6 weeks, that very first Sunday, I said to my husband, I'm so tired. He said, go and sleep. I said, it's the afternoon. He said, so what? If your body's tired, go and sleep. So I slept, and then our little dog started barking, and I woke up. Like when you're so dead tired, it's like comatose almost. But I was watching myself teach, and I said to my husband, don't speak to me. I said, because I've just been shown a 12-module program they want me to teach, and it's called the Feather Path. They've given me all the modules, the bullet points, the visions, the workbooks, everything. So I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, drew diagrams. And they said, please to ask humanity, what needs to change in order for change to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And then they gave me the word willpower, and they split it in half, will and power. And they said, everybody has will to want to do something, and they've got the power to do it. But nothing's going to get done unless you put the will and the power together
Mm-hmm.
and align it. And yet they said humans always blame somebody else for not being able to do something, only because they haven't put these two together.
Very
Anyway, I was so fascinated. And I'm coming back. I always tell a story and then come back to the main point again. I told my sister-in-law, who lives in Australia, what had happened. And I said, they told me I could write a book about it. I could do webinars about it. I could put an online course. I could just do a live 12-week course just in my village, whatever format I decided, but it needs to get out. She said to me, you need to do a pilot course, a pilot launch. I said, what's that? She said, gather some people together, run it through them, see if there are any glitches or anything that they would like to change or anywhere where they felt it didn't flow. And I said, okay. So I phoned her the next day. I said, I've got 10 women from 10 different countries. And we're going to do 3 nights. And we're going to do, 4 nights. And we're going to do 3 lessons a night. And I really jam-packed it. It's supposed to be 1.5 hours. Anyway, all these women met each other. We were all cozy over the Zoom. And then I decided to start having these questions. So I said to the one lady, what do you do when you're angry? She said, it depends. If I'm with my family and my close friends, I go very quiet. And I thought, wow, she's what my guides termed is a holder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of the most damaging things you can do to yourself. And I'll come back to the near death experience. So just remind me what a holder is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She said, but if it's with my colleagues, I draw my shoulders back, I put my head high, and I talk slowly, loudly, firmly. I said, right. So I said to the other girl, what about you? Oh, she says, I get physical.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see audibly the other women were like, oh. However, if you've been brought up in a family that does that, that's what you were taught, and that's what you do, right? So there's no judgment. She said, but just last week, a man said something very offensive to my friends and to myself. And I said to him, excuse me, I found that very offensive. So I knew what she was really saying is, hey, look at me. I found my voice.
Mm-hmm.
I said, did you thank him? She said, why would I thank him? He said something really offensive. I said, but he doesn't define who you are. So that's a perfect example of living for somebody else. I said, he doesn't define who you are. Why would you worry what somebody else thinks of you? That's their business.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of you? I said, so nobody can trigger you. Only you trigger yourself because you are supposed to be the master and the commander of this vessel, are you not? So what a gift that man gave you, showing you where you are emotionally unstable.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't mastered that part. You're still looking for approval from the outside. You will always be like a roller coaster with your emotions if you always have to come from the outside in. And that's what it means to be grounded, to
Interesting.
know who you are.
Yeah.
And that's how you leak your power. So I said, when you thank him and you are genuinely thanking him, that's not what he's going to expect or the other parties are going to expect. They want confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
They want the argument. They want to upset you, even if you're a stranger, because there's a lack within themselves. Happy people don't hurt other people.
Right.
So if you have risen above and you are becoming a master, an earth master, because you came here to master yourself, then you can have compassion. Then you rise above the situation. You don't get embroiled in it. So you see it from a bird's eye view. And they always say, why a bird's eye view? because you've risen above. You see the entire play field, not
Mm.
just right up close. You're able to have a larger perspective. And I said, and the gift that you will give him is when you do not react and when you thank him. And that will give him time
Pause.
to think,
Yes.
pause to think,
Mhm.
right? And she said to me, you know what? I've never actually ever looked at it like this.
Mm.
And then somebody else said that they have had 6 years of therapy and they learned more about themselves in 4 nights than in 6 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I said to them, well, it's not from me.
Mhm.
I'm just the downpipe. And she said, please, you have to put this online. It's so helpful. So all it is really is having this beautiful mirror and getting people to really, really dig deeply and look at that. So now I'm going to jump back to the
Yeah.
near-death experience, shall I?
Yes, and let's talk a little bit because your near-death experience was in the early 2000s, right?
That's right.
What was life like before that? Did life change for you in your near-death experience? What was life like before that?
I was a housewife having an absolute fabulous time raising children, having dinner parties, living a popcorn life, light and fluffy and no substance whatsoever.
Interesting, interesting.
It was definitely an easier life when you are unconscious
Yeah.
because you
Well, it
don't really
can
have to
be.
think.
It can be, and it can be challenging too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But
Mhm.
the thing is, when you wake up and you become aware of your action, then you've got responsibility,
Yeah.
right?
And
Because
continuous change. I don't know if that's been your experience, but it's just this continuous evolution.
you can't but change,
Mhm.
right? Well,
Mhm.
you can, I suppose. You can choose not to. You can choose to stay stagnant. So I had a big skiing accident and I had to go for an MRI. And inside, and we were not brought up religious at all because my father had been brought up as an Anglican and he went to boarding school from the age of 5. And he had to go to church all the time, even, every day at school and then on the Sundays as well. So he'd had enough of religion. And so we didn't know anything about, I don't know, my mum took us to Sunday school a few times when we were little, but that's it, not hugely. So I grew up to be a very grateful person, but not a spiritual, not a religious person. And here I realized that I had a really serious leg injury. And I'm lying in the MRI chamber. Okay, so just go back. So we've got 2 sons, 38 and 36 years old. And when the 36-year-old one was born, he just seemed to be pathetic eater. He was just like a 1-year-old and he just wasn't drinking and eating the way he should. So I enrolled in this little 6-week course from 7 till 9 at night with things I'd never heard of, naturopathy, iridiology, oh my gosh. And all I saw was the word nutrition. So it was a
Mhm.
naturopath running it.
Mm.
And I didn't know that he had played his part perfectly by being a pathetic eater to get me to that course, to meet the lady that was sitting next to me called Glenda Pellew.
Mm.
And I said to her, Glenda, what do you do? As you socially ask. And she says, why, Jill? We own an airline. Oh, I said, that's different. What do you do with the airline? She said, we take food to the people in Somalia and Ethiopia. We drop off bags of food. And I said, wow, Glenda, that's fantastic. So that's what I thought she was, right?
Mhm.
Then on the very last night, the iridiologist appeared. And as soon as she appeared, I saw this huge blue light around her from her shoulders, all over her head, all over to the other shoulder.
And this was
And
before your near-death experience?
oh, yes, this is
Okay.
like years. Max was born in 91. So
Okay. Like
literally
20
11 years
years?
beforehand. Yeah, no, 11, was it 11?
11, okay, 11,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I turned to her and I said to her, oh, look at that, look at God's glory all around her. It's all blue. And and I'd never, ever told anybody about that before, ever, ever, ever. And yet in that moment, there was Glenda. Now this is coming out of my mouth. And she said, "Oh, Jill, you see auras." I said, "What's that? What are you talking about?" She said, "Have you seen this before?" I said, "Yes, since I was a little girl." I said, "Around plants, animals, even buildings, people. I just
Wow.
call it God's glory." So she said, "Hey, Pam," to the lady who was running the course, "Jill sees auras." And everybody looked at me, and I was young and I was shy and I was so embarrassed. But last night, of course, I helped them pack up and they said, "Look, we're just going to the pub for a drink." I said, "Oh, no, I don't drink." I was a real little goody two shoes. And they said, "Well, you can have an orange juice, can't you?" And then they started asking me questions. And I said, "Yes." When I go, and we'd built a brand new house, I said, when I go to the laundry, I feel my husband's come home from work maybe for lunch. So I turn around to see who's there, and there's nobody there. And I said, and then I was in my bedroom upstairs, and he was watching rugby in the middle of winter, and he had the fire going. And I thought, oh, I'll make a cup of tea. And I walked downstairs, and the entire room, the whole of the bottom floor, was covered in thick grey swirls of smoke. And I
Wow.
said, "Where did all this smoke come from?" And he looked at me and said, "What smoke?"
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Oh, I'm just joking. Would you like a cup of tea?" And I thought, okay, there's no smoke. And then another night he walked up and I was busy writing. That was my very first automatic writing. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know. I've just written something. I didn't even know what it was." So he said,
Mhm.
"Well, read it to me." And I read it. And he said, "Well, maybe you should ask them to give you some music to that. That would make a good song." And it
Mm.
spoke about staying away from the loud, rowdy crowd. I thought,
Mhm.
wow, okay. And so fast forward, had the ski accident, lying in the MRI chamber. And I said, "Thank you so much for creating a human being that was intelligent enough to build this machine. Because without it, I might never walk again. If it was 50 years ago,
Mhm.
then what?" So I said, "I wonder how it works." Now that Glenda had asked me the following week to go to her house, and she said, "Have you ever meditated?" And I said, "No, what does that mean?" So she said, "Well, come to my house and I'll do it with you." And when she woke me up, she said, "How long do you think that was?" I said, "Oh, 5 minutes." She said, "You were under for half an hour. Tell me what you saw." So I
Mhm.
told her everything, and she said, "Oh my gosh, Jill, you're a natural." I then found out that she was actually a medium, a healer, a clairvoyant, everything, and very practiced, incredible human being, but no ego whatsoever. So after a little while, she just said to me, "I'm not going to give you answers anymore because you can do this yourself." I said, "I can't. I'm just a housewife." And she said, "No." And she said, "Everybody's got a spirit guide." I didn't know what that was. And she said, "I'm going to teach you how to connect with your spirit guide." So my husband and sons and myself would always go in the winter, go skiing to our ski house. And I said to him, "I'm not coming skiing with you this weekend or whatever, right?" And he said, "What?" I said, "No, I'm having the weekend off because I wanted to connect with my spirit guide." And I knew
Mm.
with two little boys, I wouldn't have that chance, right? So I sat in front of the computer and I said, "Who's there?" And then I got the giggles. And then I thought, okay, pull yourself together. Do this properly. Be serious. So I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Aurelius." And I thought, Aurelius? I don't know anybody called Aurelius. And then I asked a few questions and wrote it down. So that was the beginning of that. So fast forward to the MRI, and I'm saying, I wonder how this MRI works. And immediately I'm sitting on a lake in a boat, and I'm seeing the fish finder with all the magnetic resonance creating an image. I said, "Oh, magnetic resonance imaging. Okay." And then I was in Stonehenge and I was being bounced between the little stones and the big stones, and they made a different noise. And they said Stonehenge was a receiving and a transmitting station, and that's how the ancients spoke to the gods. And I went, "Oh, didn't know that." And then the very next minute, Aurelius arrived. And all this time I've got my eyes closed. And he
Mhm.
arrived in this, like a human male form, small, very crinkled, brown eyes, but which were like torch beams that just came right through me, like so warm and cozy and unconditional love. And I said to him, oh my gosh, what dimension are you in? Is this sound giving you a headache? Because the MRI is bang, 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 bang. He said to me, stop jabbering like a monkey and listen to me. I want to show you how the human energy system works. And I want you to teach this to humans. And then he showed me this human form coming towards me through mist, and it had its mouth open. And he said, this is what we call the lobby of your hotel or your portal of light. And he said, every single human has no idea that they own a hotel with 7 floors. And you have a penthouse and you have a basement. And then he showed me the image of Da Vinci man with the vitreous man out like that with the layers. So he said, let me now explain to you. When you breathe in, humans give this many different names. They call it oxygen, life force, prana, spirit, blessing. He says, for all we care, you can call it strawberry jam. We don't care. But without it, there's no life. So I said, yes. He says, well, it goes through the lobby of your hotel, and then you have an energetic lift shaft from your penthouse to your basement. And on each of the 7 floors, you have a lift door. So it goes in, goes up and down, and all those doors, he said, open up at the same time. And it's just like, pew, pew, pew. And then he showed me, as we honed into the lift door as it opened, what looked like a vortex or a centrifugal force, like a test tube in a laboratory that goes around so fast, or the blades on a helicopter. And he said, as the oxygen, he called it the energy, as the energy hit that, it spun it and it filtered throughout that whole area. And the same process was happening on each floor. He said, but mankind holds emotions. And when you have a negative emotion, it has color. He said, have you ever heard the words red with rage or green with envy? And he said, it is imperative that you study the origins of your words. He says, because they have incredible meaning and hold so much power. And he said, I'm going to speak about men, as in male, female, male. He said a lot of them hold their rage in their chests, and it's red with rage. So it's condensed, it's contracted. So the energy can't go through anymore to that whole area. And he said over a long period of time, those cells are no longer at ease. They are at dis-ease. And so they become diseased. And he said, and it's self-inflicted. And he said the reason males have more heart attacks, and he said you can get heart attack, cancer, or stroke from holding when you're a holder. And yet you've got a portal of light and you haven't learnt the art of communication. So it means when it comes out your mouth to explain yourself to somebody else, it's got to be light, calm, not pointing fingers, but saying, this is how the situation makes me feel. Let's talk about it. And he said that is why so many women last longer than men, because they're good communicators. They get it out, and the men hold. And he said, humans don't understand that what they do to others and what comes out of their mouth is the gift that they give to themselves. He says, we call it the boomerang effect, and yet humans seem so surprised when it comes back to bite them on the ass, right? And then he just said that he showed me champagne glasses at a wedding and a couple pouring in the champagne. And he said, as those champagne glasses fill up with champagne, think of them as emotions. Once they are full, you can't fill them anymore. So what happens then? They start crashing and colliding and causing great damage. And they said emotions are emotion, energy in motion. It's not energy in stagnation, because nothing lives in stagnation. starts to rot and crumble. So he said, if you are not in charge of your emotions or your thoughts, then who is? And that is what it means to be conscious. That is what it means to be aware. And he said, you don't have to react to stuff. If somebody does something that unsettles you and they're waiting for an answer, you can say, you know what, that's very interesting. I'll have to think about that. And you walk away. You don't ever have to get back to them. And if somebody says something that unsettles you and it's about somebody else, you can say, you know, those are your words, not mine. And you're giving them back. Because if you don't do that, then you are complicit. And that person is not there to defend themselves. So it was incredible the way he said that. And as I've learned through all the years since then, is how people store. So a lady came to me in her 70s, and when we first arrived here, and she said to me, I think I've got lung cancer. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do about it? This was all new to me. And she said, I need to know whether I do have lung cancer. I said, oh, I'm not allowed to diagnose. I'm not a doctor. So she said, you've either got the gift or you haven't. So I said, okay, just sit down over there, because we were outside, and I had a pad and a pen in my car, which is ridiculous. I never have. And I said to Aurelius, does she have lung cancer? He said, affirmative. I said, why the lungs? He said, because the lungs are a holding place or a reservoir. I said, for what? He said, for all expectations and for grief.
Yeah.
And so her husband then had passed away, and he came in and he gave me a whole lot of messages for her. And I've just realized, as I've said that, I suppose that would be my first mediumship. But yes, I only thought it happened last year. Isn't that weird? And so, so weird. And then she said, oh, no, I've dealt with that. So I said, could you write me a paragraph of what he did to you that upset you? Because they had been divorced. She said, a paragraph, I could write a book. And then suddenly, so she was a holder. And yet it took her about 40 years before she got cancer in that area.
Yeah.
And that is why they teach forgiveness, not so that, you know, everything's forgotten as such, but that you're not holding and forgive yourself for the holding. I found that quite incredible.
Yeah.
So many different areas. Like, I had a man who had pancreatic cancer because his farms were all taken away. It was a bitter pill to swallow. That's why it was in the bile duct. I had somebody else that had cancer of the bowel. She had problems where she had emotional problems in digesting things. It's all affected with the different organs. And then just after I had my operation, when they downloaded the feather path to me, the other thing that they gave me was a book that I've been writing called A Guide for the Awakening Human, a map for the soul's expansion. And in it, they gave me 24 different emotional hertz and 24 matching HERTZ, vibrational frequency, like tuning fork hertz, to play for that. And they said that humans are a living orchestra, and every organ in their body vibrates to a different frequency and works together beautifully like an orchestra. But when you get those emotions that go and settle in the lungs or the kidneys or the pancreas, wherever they are, because you haven't looked after your emotions you're holding, they're too heavy for the organ. So the tune is not harmonious anymore.
Right.
So now there's a discord.
Yeah.
So you've got to get rid of that emotion, and then you've got to do a realignment, like a tire on your car when you have to get your wheels aligned. And so
Yeah. So
it's
when
quite
you
simple.
received this initial information about the hotel and the 7 levels, I just want to clarify, when you say 7 levels, it sounds like you're talking about the chakra system. Would that
But
be what
that's a
it
name.
aligned to? Yeah.
Yes, but it's just a name again, isn't it? It's just
Right,
Any of
right.
these systems that we've given a name.
I just wanna connect that piece because that's what it sounded like.
Yeah.
So your near-death experience happened shortly after this?
Yeah, so I had the MRI, and then he said, yes, he said, I don't know if you're ever going to walk again properly. Let's see what we can do. He said, you've ripped all the tendons, all the ligaments, smashed the patella, did this, did that, whatever. So he did the op, and my lung collapsed. But he went on holiday, and the anesthetist had to look after me. And the physiotherapist came up and she said, I don't like the sound of your lungs at all. And she cleared a lot of gunk. And then the anesthetist came to see me, and the physio said, look, I don't think she should go home just yet. No, she's fine. Off she goes. So off I went home. And because I'd had such a serious op, I went to the guest bedroom and my husband was in the master bedroom, and so that I could sleep and say if he didn't move at night and, jiggle my leg around.
Right.
And it was the middle of the night, maybe 2 a.m, and I heard the sound. It sounded like a steam train. And then I realized that was me. And then I realized I wasn't breathing. And then I panicked. And then I had all these thoughts going through my head. And when our son was 5, just at the traffic lights when I was taking him to school, he just turned to me and he says, Mum, do you know what you have to do just before you die? So I said, what is that? He said, you've got to thank God. I said, for what? He says, Mum, for giving you this life. And there's this child that wasn't brought up in a religious background. And it was almost like he had given me that message for that very moment. And suddenly I thought, wow, yes. So I started thanking God for children, for a home, for warmth, for friends, And the very next minute, 3 pairs of hands came out of the ceiling in the pitch dark. And the light was so bright, but it was so soft at the same time. I know it sounds ridiculous. And they came out hands like this. And they held me under my shins, under my hips, my torso. And they rocked me and they started singing Rockabye Baby. And they said, it's not your time. You have work to do. And then slowly that light went away and my husband came in and he said to me, you called. I said, no, I didn't. He said, yes, you did. I heard you. Oh, he said, I don't like the look of you at all. So I didn't really know what they meant by you've got work to do. And our house was on the market in Auckland. We sold the house and we came here. And I became a real estate agent. And I went out about, say, 10 miles out of the town to this little area. And I needed to put little pamphlets in the letterboxes. And the lady that ran the place said to her, asking permission, being polite, excuse me, how do I, do this? I didn't know whether they opened up the back for that kind of thing. She said, well, just like anybody else, you just put it through the slot, And I was, wow, I wonder what's happened to you. That night when I went to bed, she was standing at the bottom of my bed with her father. And he had a horse and he was reining in a horse. And I was told that he reined her in like an animal. And then I saw her busy decorating, icing wedding cakes. And they said, no, she's not going to be icing wedding cakes, but she's a very creative being and she's not doing stuff that's creative in her life, and that she's living to appease her father, no, not living for herself, and looking for his approval. And that's why she bought the business, because she wanted him to say, well done, my girl. What a good girl are you? How clever. Look at you. Wow, haven't you succeeded? And they said, until she starts living for herself, her heart is getting so heavy that by the end of the year, she could well have a heart attack and die. And that it's my job to give her this message. And he was all dressed in British tweed, so I knew he was British. Well, my car drove me to her business the next day. I had no intention of going there. And this had never happened to me before, right? With this thing for this message like this. And she saw me and she said, yes, like, oh my God, you again. And I said, "I've got a message for you." And she goes, "Who from?" I said, "From my head." She says, "What's the message?" So I told her the message. And she said, "How do you know my father's British?" I said,
Mm.
Because he was wearing handicap clothes, British clothes, tweeds." And she said, "How did you get this information?" I said, "I have no idea. This is the first time it's happened like this. I don't know." She said, "Well, you're 100% correct." And then I
Right.
started shaking a bit because I thought, brand new to town, brand new real estate agent, if the news got out that I'm an utter nutter, right? And then she just said, "My father this, my father that, blah, blah, blah." And about 2 months later, I saw her in the grocery store and she said, "Wow, it's you." I said, "Yeah, it's me." And she looked completely different. She said, "I've sold the business. I've enrolled in an art course in Auckland. I bought a house mortgage free, and I have never felt so light in my life."
Beautiful.
And my guide said, "You have to teach people that they are not here to appease others. They're here to appease themselves. Because when they appease themselves, they will automatically appease others, because
Mhm.
they're going to be filling themselves up, and they are going to be abundant, and they're going to be authentic, and they're going to be happy." They said, "But when people are miserable and frustrated and angry,"
Mhm.
and then they said, "Do humans know that they are running an energy station? They own their own energy station, and all of them get paid $100 in energy every day." And they said, "Let's give you an example. You get invited to a barbecue, and it's Sunday, and you've worked all week. You don't want to go to the barbecue,
Mhm.
but you find yourself saying yes. And now the hostess has asked you to bring a potato salad. And you go, yes. You know you've got potatoes, but then you go to the fridge and you realize that you're right out of mayonnaise. Now you've got to go to the shops. Now you're really angry. Now you snap at your husband and you snap at the kids because you're now doing something for somebody else that you don't want to do. You're appeasing somebody else. You're living your life for somebody else instead of saying, "Thank you so much. It's wonderful. I've decided to make a date with myself and my family, and I'm taking a bit of a break, but have a wonderful time."
Yeah.
So they said, "You've just given them $20 out of your $100. And then somebody else does something else, and you've given another $20 away. And now, before you know it, you are in deficit, and your hotel starts to crumble. It's now going into disrepair because you haven't been looking after the repairs and maintenance." And they said it's that simple.
Well, I'm curious, I actually I'm totally aligned with what you're saying. So, this question isn't because I'm not aligned with what you're saying, but I'm curious because I think when we hear this message initially, we think, well, how would the world work if we're all just working for ourselves? And how do we cooperate with, business partners or associates, with family members, and so forth? So I'm curious what your thoughts are about that as you've, I'm sure, lived this principle yourself.
You do it with joy.
Mm,
Just own yourself.
mhm.
So you are full. And when you are full, you're bouncing
Yeah, yeah.
and you're happy. So think about the people in your life that you like hanging out with. Do you like hanging out with the misery guts, or do you like hanging out with those people that are full and happy? Make you
Yeah.
laugh, right?
Mhm,
That's who you're happy to hang out with. You don't want the misery guts. The misery guts ones are the ones playing victim.
mhm,
The ones playing victim are the ones that haven't taken self-responsibility yet because they've got low self-esteem, because they don't know who they are. They
mhm.
don't know how fabulous they are,
Yeah,
right? So they've got
right.
to come back to themselves to be grounded.
It's so fascinating because I had an appointment with someone this afternoon, and this was the focus of the appointment, was to be grounded, make choices for the self, and to do it from that place of neutrality and joy, not from like,
Yeah.
it's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna go do this," versus "Oh, well, I'm angry at you because you wanna do that, and I'm gonna go do this." It's like, no, you just make a decision for yourself that's grounded and aligned with your energy as you spoke to, and then you're retaining your energy and you're spreading that good energy with your
It's
own. Yeah.
Julie, it's back to communication.
Mhm.
Okay, so Julie, you and I are living together. Right. What do you want to do? Oh, I want to go and see a movie, but I don't. I want to go to the art show. Right? Oh, okay. Do you want to come to the art show with me? No, I don't necessarily want to go to the art show. Go to the movie, have an absolute blast. I can't wait to hear all about it.
Mhm.
And then you know what? On Saturday night, we're going to go and have Indian dinner together. How's that?
Mhm.
You know?
Yep.
And they said to me, humans call it selfish. They said, we don't. We call it service to self. They said, if
Mhm.
you're on an airline and the oxygen mask comes down, they always tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help your child.
Right.
Because if you can't breathe, you certainly can't help your child. So why would we think so little of ourselves? To not look after ourselves. I'm
Yeah.
not saying to be mean to anybody else,
Right.
but to stand in who you are. So they've asked me to read this to you today. And this is what they told me. This is the very first introduction to the feather path. So hopefully this will make sense with
Mhm.
what we've been talking about. The feather path is the art of mastering the below, right? So that you can rise above the situations when somebody says something to you. Humans are born as light. Souls incarnate with ease, radiance, purity, and weightlessness. But the moment they enter Earth, they inherit stories, they absorb pain, and they carry generational wounds. So then they develop coping strategies. They learn fear and they accept limitation. They become entangled in the density and then they forget their lightness. They grow heavy. They become burdened. They dim themselves. They drag themselves through life and they start becoming heavy beings. Not because they are heavy, but because they are burdened by everything that is not theirs. No, appeasing, right?
Mhm.
Humans are not meant to be heavy. They're meant to be light bearers, but you cannot feel light if your soil is packed with rubble. And that is exactly what your work uncovers, my work. You cannot rise like a feather if your life's garden is overrun with weeds. Those people you're inviting into your life that you have to disinvite because you didn't put your fences up, you didn't put your boundaries. You cannot ascend in consciousness if your emotional soil is left unattended. You cannot feel ease and flow if your roots are starving or strangled. And you cannot embody your soul if your human garden, your life, is chaotic, abandoned, or collapsing. And you cannot return to light while you drag the weight of unexamined life. And that's why the feather path begins in the soil. This is the ascension secret that no one teaches properly. You cannot bypass the below to reach the above. You cannot float if you haven't tended your ground. You cannot become light if you refuse to face what makes you heavy. Ascension is not escapism, fantasy, or even superiority. Ascension is not higher realms without human healing. It's integration, embodiment, then clearing, nourishing, choosing, grounding, tending, reclaiming in order to remember the light that you are. And ascension is the act of removing everything that is not you so your lightness can emerge. Humans don't become lighter by adding more light. They become lighter by removing what weighs them down. This is the feather path. This is the garden. This is the magic square. This is earth mastery. This is a reclamation of soul through soil. So why would the feather path resonate so deeply? Because every soul knows I came as light. I forget that I'm light, but I just long to feel light again. I want my life to feel easier, softer, freer. I want to rise above my past, my pain, and my patterns. I just want to return to myself. So the feather path is a structured, grounded way of doing that. It answers the human's ancient ache. Why do I feel so heavy when I'm made of light? And the feather says, because your soil has never been tended. Come on, it's time to clear it, nourish it, and reclaim yourself.
Love that. Love that so much. So many things that came up as you were talking about is, it's the remembering the light, but also recognizing that when we develop, as humans, like we come in as babies, we don't have a lot of, we did before we came in our life path planning, make decisions about what that was going to look like as a baby, as a child, and so forth. But as a human, we don't have a lot of control or ability to take that path that you're talking about, which is a lot of the reason why as children we become disconnected from that light. That light comes with us and then it slowly becomes more and more disconnected. So it's really about like a conditioning process and then a deconditioning process and then a integration into the light again. I'm just curious, what your thoughts are about this conditioning period and how that affects us.
Well, from what I can understand from the work I do as a hypnotherapist, so in my hypnotherapy, I do past lives or / parallel lives, connect people with deceased relatives and introduce them to their spirit guides, their life purpose, and answer their questions. And I have seen so many people having so many different lives, and then they go to the light or the light counsel, and they find out why they're doing the life they're doing right now.
Mhm.
The people that they've contracted with, why they've had so much pain. I'll give you a perfect example. Well, a few. I had a lady from Oklahoma and a one from Czechoslovakia, and I had them about 2 days apart. And that's how they do it. They send me a few clients who have a similar kind of theme going. It's fascinating. And then that's how I learn and then can be of better service. These two arrived, and the first one, she had been an investment banker living for her parents
Mhm.
because they wanted their daughter to be successful so they could tell all their friends, look how successful, haven't we done a fabulous job? But she was miserable. She thought, why am I working these crazy hours? And she had money, what pennies in her pocket, but her soul was starving. So she was taking a sabbatical to find out what was going on. When she left the lifetime that she had gone to, the past life, and gone to the wise counsel, they were laughing and they were joking and having so much fun. And I said, well, let's ask them, what is the lesson you came to learn? She said, lesson? There's no lesson, just an experience.
Mhm.
So I said, so what did you come for that, for the experience? She said, so that it can be logged into the database. I said, tell me more about this database, because it sounded like Akashic Records.
Mhm. Mhm.
And she said, you can call it the Hall of Records, you can call it Akashic Records, you can call it a database. She says, it doesn't really matter. I said, who runs the database? She said, the creator gods. I said, what's the purpose of it? She said, well, you know how you used to have a video store and you would go in and on a Friday night you'd decide, oh, we need a video for tonight. And then you would scan it. They had all the dramas together, all the
Mhm.
docos together, the love stories. And you would choose one and then you would settle down and enjoy it. She said, when you finished a lifetime, you then, when you decide to have another incarnation, you go to the database and you choose what you've decided to do, whether you're going to be on Orion, Andromedus, some other planet you've never heard of, or Earth. And you go, this time I want courage, because last time I wasn't very courageous. So you go into the database, you choose the lifetime that had courage so you can learn all about it. So that when you come down, you're ready and you remember the GPS markers. You bring the people from your soul family into that lifetime where you need courage. One is going to be a complete bastard. He's going to play the husband. He's going to beat you. He's going to be an alcoholic. He's going to have affairs, whatever it is, until you find your courage to stand up and say, actually, I'm worth more and I'm leaving. Now, many humans will say, he was a bastard, he's this, he's that. And then when they finish the life and they go back to the all that is, there he is, shining, beautiful spirit. He said, I played my part well, hey, didn't I?
Mhm.
And they said, it's nothing but a play.
Mhm.
So you go through the unlearning, the veil, and then you come through it slowly and slowly, and then you get your GPS markers, and then you start waking up, and then you start blossoming. And they said Earth School is one of the hardest schools. And they said everybody that's here should pat themselves on the back because it's like going through a heavy swamp. So if it's like a video game and you want to get to the top and get that gold bar, whatever, in Earth terms and Earth learning, you would have got 10 gold bars for your expansion as opposed to being somewhere else. Does that help a
Yeah.
bit?
Yeah. Well, and for sure, and I believe that. It's interesting because when I hear this often, and there's a part of me that connects with it, but there's a part of me that doesn't, and that's this idea that Earth School is so hard, and I sometimes wonder, when I get to the other side, I communicate with the other side, but when I get over there and I'm like, you know, you can just ask anything and receive anything, and it's all that much easier to receive. I'm just like, was it really the hardest, or was there other? I just
But
always
it's
am curious about that.
because of telepathy,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So you and I are very fortunate because we are already practicing telepathy.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
when you channel or when you receive, it's a telepathic communication.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, having to use physical words like we are and pushing it over your system is harder work. And also, we can lie. We
Mhm.
can lie about things to protect ourselves. But
Which is
on other
also an
planets, they
interest
can't.
Yeah, which is also an
It's
interesting
clean.
concept, because I think that as more and more of us become more connected to our telepathy, to our ability to read energy, to understand what's happening below the surface, less people are going to be able to hide who they
Yes.
really are.
But
And
that's ascension,
yeah, that is
right?
essential. Right. Another concept that I would love to get your opinion and your thoughts on is this idea of moving into the fifth dimension that everybody is talking about, and it really feels like, and I've received messages along these lines, that we already have access to the fifth dimension energy, but it really is our deciding to live within that energy versus um, versus continuing to repeat old patterns.
They're just laughing and they're saying, isn't Earth such a competitive place?
Mhm.
You know, I need to be in the fifth. Oh, look at you. You're only in the fourth. Oh, look at those ones. They're still only in the third. And they said,
Right.
why would you judge something that you were once yourself?
Right, exactly. And
Right?
it's so freeing when you get to that place where, I grew up in a high demand religion, and there was so much conditioning around, we've got to get everybody to agree with us. We've got to get everybody in our congregation, that kind of energy. And so there was a continuous process of kind of assessing yourself and assessing others, and trying to, recruit, for lack of a better word, recruit people and so on and so forth. And when I let go of that conditioning, when I let go of that pattern, it was so freeing to just be here and not having to judge where other people are
But
in
because
any
it's not our
process.
business. It's not our
It's none of our
business.
business.
We came to own ourselves. That's where
Mhm.
they said, just own yourself. When I was traveling to Queenstown from Wanaka over a Crown Range through the mountain range, and it was a clear, clear day, and suddenly in front of me, the whole sky became a cloud like toothpaste, and it said JOY, and I said, "Oh, big deal! Can't you do better than that? Everybody knows joy. Everybody like joy. What?" And they said, "No, listen, joy. Just own yourself. You
Mhm.
on your path.
Yeah.
If you do your path really well and take the time for stillness, take the time to date yourself."
Mhm.
They said, "No music, no friends, no devices. Get a little rucksack, put in some water, some juice, a sandwich, whatever you want. Go into nature, take a jotter, sit by yourself, write all your desires, everything that you want, connect with yourself." They said, "That's a holy communion." And
Mhm.
then start filling yourself up. They said, "It doesn't matter if you have diamonds
Mm.
and beautiful clothes and fancy cars and mansions and everything." They said they are called trappings
Mhm.
because many are entrapped by them. But they said there are many that have the trappings that are not entrapped. They said the only time that you are entrapped with your trappings is when you think that you are better than somebody else because you've got the trappings and they haven't.
Mhm.
So it's always about the way you look at stuff and what is it that you want to do with your life? What
Yeah.
do you want to do?
Right.
Most people don't know. They're
It's
just
so
going
true.
aimlessly.
Yeah. Most people can answer the question, what you about what
Don't
they
want.
don't want, but they have a real struggle to identify what it is they do want. Um, so, we're getting close to time to end here, and I was just curious, what other lessons or any other wisdom that you'd like to share with us? And I'd also love for you to share any spiritual practices. That's something that I ask all my guests is, about your spiritual practices that help you stay connected.
I have no spiritual practice whatsoever. And in actual fact, when things happen, my friends say, "Well, have you spoken to Aurelius and Dominus?" And I go, "No, I completely forget they're there."
I
So
understand that, yes.
so I was invited to go to Peru in 2020, and while I was there, I walked into a building on top of a hill, an old stone room without a ceiling, and there were 4 other people with me. One of them said to me afterwards, "As soon as you walked through that room, you said, 'I hear voices.'" I said, "I never said that."
Mm,
And they said, "Well, yes, you did." And when I went through, the person who was sharing a room with me got such a shock because they just knew me as Jill. And here I was channeling in a strange language. It wasn't light language. And he started videoing me. And afterwards, Alba Weinman, I was with her, she hypnotized me 28 times and, I got all this information for the discourse through that. She said to me, "Oh, Dean just showed me the video on the little bus going back. When this happens again, we all have to be there." I said, "It's never going to happen again." When I got on the little bus, because there were 36 of us and we had 12, 12, 12 in each little of the minivans, the girl who had said to me, you heard voices, she said to me, "Jill, what do you think that was?" And I said, "It felt like I was a high priestess and I was asking for a good harvest for my people." I said, "I remember one word, let's look it up." So we're
mm,
sitting in and we're Googling it, and it came back and it said, "Sumerian goddess of the harvest."
mm.
And it was like, wow. But if we're going to finish now, there's just one little story I want to tell you, and I'm
Yeah,
hoping it's going to help the audience.
yeah.
So, In February, I went to, I always like to absorb and learn more and more and more. And I went to a trauma course and to do womb work, because so much happens in the womb that the baby hears before they're born, that sets them up for a lot of stuff that they actually need to get rid of, which is not theirs to carry, right? With parents arguing or whatever. Anyway, I'm on the very last day of this course, and I was staying with my son in Melbourne, and he said, "Listen, Mum, today the trains don't run as regularly because there are fewer people going into the city. Just make sure that you look at the timetable." So I looked at the timetable, everything great. Every day that I went on to that course into the city, I always sat on platform 1. That's the line to the city. For some reason, on this day, I was on platform 2. And the difference between platform 1 and platform 2 is there's a bench for platform 1 and a bench for platform 2.
Mhm.
And I thought, where's the train? And I saw a train going on the other way. And 15 minutes later, another train. Still nothing on this side. And then it arrived and it said, "Train to Mernda." I'm thinking, I'm not going to Mernda. What? And it sort of came out of my trance. And I thought, what on earth am I doing on platform 2? And I sat on platform 1. So I thought I'd quickly better let them know I'm going to be late for the course. So I sent a text and she came back and she said to me, "You know what? Everything happens for a reason." I'm thinking, well, I can't see the reason for this. 3 stops from the city, a young couple got on. They looked Persian or from Dubai, beautiful, big eyes, long eyelashes, about 19, 20 years old. And they were just looking into each other's eyes, totally besotted. And I was sitting on this side and they were sitting over here and the aisle was in the middle. And he leant over to her and he said to her, "Give me your hand." So she went like that and he kissed it. And she turned it upside down and kissed his hand. And then he looked into her eyes and he said to her, "I'm pleased to meet you today." She said, "Don't be so silly. You see me every day." He said, "You're not listening to me. I'm pleased to meet you today." And I got the shivers. And my guides immediately came in and they said, so many humans are walking around with anger about the people in their lives, that are they pleased to meet them that day? Because they are still holding on to the hurt, the perceived hurt that that person did to them last week, last month, a year ago. But they said any of those humans could have changed like that, even the day before, and they're no longer that same person. And yet you haven't got to know them because you're still holding. You haven't started fresh. So can you really say you are open and you are pleased to meet them today? Not yesterday, not last year, today. And more importantly, when you brush your teeth in the morning and you look in the mirror, can you actually look at yourself and say, "I'm pleased to meet you today"? They said, because you're going to spend the whole day with yourself. And if you're not pleased with what you see and how you feel, then only you can do something about it. And that was just the reason why I was on platform 2. And they said to me, that young man might spend the rest of his life wondering what his purpose is. And yet he lived his purpose in that one sentence, because you were meant to hear it, they said, in order to share the message throughout the rest of your life with others. And that's his purpose.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. How can people get a hold of you, Jill?
I've got a website. So it's Jill, Jill, Cole, COLE, .org. Jill Cole.
Perfect.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been a lot of fun.
It was lovely meeting you, Julie.